All right, I think I'm live on both fronts here. I got one person in queue. Thanks for joining me right away. I just wanted to talk with everyone and just check in. It's been crazy for me the last half months or so. On top of the global pandemic and everything that we got going on, we've had some things happen in our community that I've been involved with that have been really I've dedicated a lot of my time towards in a way that I've been compelled to. It's a calling, and it's something that is dear in my heart. Talking about one of the issues, I guess, that I've been involved with is police reform, and just really talking about how to get over the hump. We have a lot of people right now out in the streets the last few days, really just who are just really trying to be heard, and I get it. And the most important thing about that is, hold on for a second. Most important thing about being heard is someone acknowledging what you had to say. And I think when you protest and you do the things that people are doing right now in regards to that and being heard, uh, you either get a reaction or you don't. And the people that react either dig in deeper to what they are and what they've always done, or they take a quick moment to pause for a second. I think really right now with it happening nationally, in big cities, Detroit, um, happening in Minnesota, obviously, and Indiana, and all these other places, California, people are just out in the streets, really angry, really rioting, and a lot of those riots have begun in a peaceful process, and there's been some successful peaceful processes, protests that have been happening. But there's agitators, there's people who have their own agendas. There's some things that happen within that don't make it as effective, and that is not being very organized in some ways, if you will, when it comes to getting your message out there and heard. For me, the reason why I wanted to just take a moment of time to just really talk is that I've been really internalizing a lot of the trauma that has happened. I've had personal experience with officers who have been aggressive, who have used and abused their power behind the badge, and have really done things to me personally where, when you hear about another person being traumatized, victimized, brutalized, or even murdered, such as we have now with Mr. Llyod, it's a re-victimization, and it's something that very few people understand, unless you go through that, unless you have a loved one go through that, unless you're in a situation where you've dealt with it in a way that has changed your life. And anyone who's had experiences with police in a negative way like that, who is not committing a crime, who are not out there taking advantage of others, who are not doing anything but being a citizen, who may have some nonviolent infractions such as speeding, rolling through a stoplight, um, and things of that nature. In Mr. Lloyd's case, passing a $20 bill that was fake, who he may have known or not known, but it resulted in him losing his life. And so, as I was watching today and the last few weeks of how people are really dealing with this in their own way, and I see a lot of people online really protesting against the outcome on Mr. Llyod and others that have been brutalized and excessive forced victims of police. I just want you guys to appreciate that it is something that happens all the time in a way that it's very subtle. Whether it's getting pulled over for no reason, getting a ticket, to where there's certain comments made during the interaction, um, and to things that then are not subtle, where you have excessive force and you have people pinning you down and subduing you in a way where it causes mental trauma, and physical trauma and injury, and and not to sit here and bash police officers. That is not my goal today. It's just really talking about really just the experience that is. I've had interactions with officers, uh, far and few between that were positive. Let's put it that way. And the older I get, the more and more I realize that it's the younger black men who are in vulnerable situations, being out late at night, who are working front lines, doing different things that have to be out in here, who are in impoverished neighborhoods, who don't have a lot of opportunity and things like that. These tend to be the ones who are mostly affected by some of the positive procedures that the officers um, are standing behind. And uh, there's no solution for someone who feels traumatized, brutalized, and knows someone that they love, someone that's traumatized and brutalized by someone in life. When it comes to that, you don't really have answers to get over it. It's just something that you deal with, you've experienced, and you learn that and expect that to happen. And for many people, I guess my whole point today was to come on here and talk about what's next. It took me about 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes to get to that, but like I really wanted to talk about what's next. You protested, you've advocated online, you screamed that it's not right, you want change, you want things to be different, you want things to be better. And I guess when we think about that, what's next then? What are your options? What is your choices that you have after you've done what you've done here in the last few days? And before we talk about what's next, I just want to like really bring this home to you. Um, for a lot of people who are talking about outcry, who are talking about how wrong this is and the injustice, and how this is not shouldn't be going on for the rest of life, and we need to make change. I question how many of you today, just based off today, or yesterday, whenever you see this, uh, have called a person of color and just asked them, are they okay? Ask them, what's going on with you, man? You cool? And there's a lot going on. I'm sorry to hear what's happened, but I just wanted to check in with you. How many people have truly done that for the people that they know and care about when it comes to this issue? I know personally for me, I didn't get one call. I didn't get one check in. I didn't get one, how you doing? And a lot of that's probably uh, thought as I'm a big guy, I'm a tough guy, I'm an educated person, I'm very successful in some ways, and that just doesn't add up to someone reaching out to me in a way that would see that comfort to me in a way that I know someone out there understands, really how hard it could be right now. And I'm not calling anyone out or saying anything negative about that, but I just want you to pause for that, because if you think about me right now going out to the grocery store and buying some food for my groceries, for my family, for my groceries for my family, and just having interaction with officers and things like that, it's not a positive feel. It's not a positive look. It's not a positive anything based on the climate. And this is not just since Mr. Floyd's been killed. There's been on some ongoing things in our personal city that I've been advocating for, as far as change is concerned with policing and their procedures and excessive force and um, um, biased interactions in a way that bring trauma and abuse towards you in a way that is not necessary. We deal with this all the time, and I think with the pandemic and the tensions and boiling over and people being not able to do what they normally do and then have this incident happen, it was just a great recipe for disaster. Right now, I'm in the city of East Lansing, home of Michigan State University, and we had some protests in Lansing, which is our capital. And we're just about a mile and a half or so from there in East Lansing. And over 1,000 people gathered and did their thing today, and really did the thing in a way so far to this point that was nonviolent. There was some minor skirmishes, but those people walked from Lansing's capital to the police station here in East Lansing, and we had a couple of broken windows, maybe of a police car, but no one was injured or hurt, from what I know. And there were some good people out in the field who really, really stepped up to make it be that way. And I want to salute you to that. But I just want to come back to that. This issue is bothersome for a lot of people. It's bothersome for me. It's bothersome for you, and we need to do something about it. We need to talk about what's next now. We really need to understand what's next. And I apologize. I had a whole script about all the things I was going to say, how I was going to say it, and I'm just like talking. And if I jump around, I apologize. And if I don't make sense in some ways, I hope you understand and appreciate the effort and the intent about what I'm talking about in the subject, and take for what you will with it. Um, when I think about what's next, I particularly there was a as I said before, protest in Lansing, peaceful protest in Lansing. I was asked to speak at that, be a keynote speaker for that, and I declined for several reasons. Um, but um, I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to go out there and speak and talk and say my piece and why. And for the reasons why I didn't, I'll just tell you a few. One, COVID-19 and that pandemic that we're in, and we have a stay-at-home order in place where large gatherings is something that is not what we can do. And obviously that ordinance was broken today by many people, broken all around the country when it comes to that. So I did that for health reasons, number one. Number two, I did do it in another way because I've been speaking a lot about this issue here in East Lansing, and really, I feel exhausted talking about what we are going through. I feel exhausted talking about uh, wanting change, needing change, asking our leaders to do something about the everyday occurrences that we go through. And I didn't do that because I didn't think it would be effective. I didn't think it'd be profound. I didn't think it would be in a result. And that's really where I'm at right now with this issue when it comes to um, police reform and change. I want results. And talking to me is overrated, if you will. So I've been working on recommendations that I've submitted to our local government here in East Lansing. Um, and what I'll say about those recommendations is that, in my opinion, I feel like they weren't taken serious. And they were recommendations that I put a lot of time and energy in regards to something that can be done right now, today, without really getting into too much of a problem with the police unions and some of the different things they do to protect officers as opposed to holding them accountable. But there were some procedural things, specifically through arrest and things like that, that I thought that um, would be very helpful cosmetically, and it would be a start of some cultural change within these organizations in a way where people of color in the community saw that our leaders were working on these very complicated, tough issues that are happening nationally around uh, our country. And so, for those things to be put to the side and not really even explored, or for those things not to be something that's in play as we speak, um, the talking is over with. And so it's time to do something different. It's about getting active, it's about being involved, it's about getting a seat at the table. And that's really where I'm at right now. And that's really what I'm working on, qualifying my qualifications so I can have a seat at the table in a way that we have meaningful change, long term change, and for a long term problem that we've been dealing with for a while. So when we talk about what's next, that's really some of the steps that I'm doing. I'm getting involved with local government, I'm getting involved with communities and boards, and talking with people of leadership, and getting myself in a position to really learn why the problem has not changed right now. We know what the problem is. Our leaders know what the problem is, but there's a disconnect from knowing what the problem is to doing something about the problem. It seems like you have sometimes some situations, you have some leaders who are not comfortable with the issue at all, don't understand it, can relate to it. And every time they are able to turn their heads, the issue is not something that is meaningful to them in a way that, unlike myself, I wake up at 4 o'clock every morning thinking about what I can do to improve community policing. And so, um, for a lot of people, they don't really have the opportunity or luxury to be able to get involved, such as myself, in the way that I've been doing. And I came up with these recommendations for our leadership in a way that would show people who are able to really be involved, be active, that you're able to work on these things and you have that put forth effort. And to the credit of our local government right now, they have finally, after I think about a year in a few months, come up with a plan to have a community oversight commission, which is will be designed to study the issue of policing in our community, and then be able to, from that information, create a commission to advise the council on the issues that we have in policing, in our community policing. And that's just the way the process works. That's just the way the process has happened, and it has to happen in order for it to get done within that structure. And they are working really hard on that as we speak. But my problem with that is that what do we do in the meantime? You know, the commission that is being created to create the other commission, they're talking about 6, 7 months of a process of gathering all this information and trying to understand what the problem is and how to go about the problems and what to focus on and all the different things. So then they can set up a commission to really study that issue and come up with solutions for our city council. And I'm like to myself, like, am I the only one sitting here thinking that, like, well, okay, that's I mean, that's really awesome. Don't get me wrong, but like, there's some things we know right now. There's some things that I've recommended right now that you can go to your city manager and really talk with this person and really advocate for what the community is upset about, what the community is screaming about. East Lansing particularly dodged a big bullet today. Um, we are in COVID-19 life. A lot of the MSU students are gone off campus, doing their thing in remotely through the internet for the school and finish up the school year. But normally we have about 45, 49,000 more people in our community who are here. And with all this going on, and the thousand or so people that came from Lansing to East Lansing, and kind of that dynamic, uh, that was a great fuel for the fire to get a lot of those people really charged up and really cause us a lot of problems, like you see in Minneapolis and California and Texas and all these different things. They really have some major property damage things going on, and violence that's happening with people speaking out. And so, for me, I really think that we dodged a bullet. We've had two high profile cases here in our city regarding policing. One was involving a gentleman who was pulled over for a nonviolent infraction, turning without using a signal, that ended up him being pinned to the ground, end up with him having a knee to the back of his neck, much like Mr. Floyd, um, and resulting into injury. A month or so after that, we had another young man who was involved with the police. He was, in my opinion, not violent towards or aggressive towards police, but he ended up on the ground and having his neck be pinned by officer's knee. This particular officer I'm talking about is an officer that has had 4 or 5 complaints previous to now about racial profiling, excessive force, and some different issues like that, from what I understand. And it just, I can't tell you enough how lucky we are that those incidents that happen, and the student body that we normally have, and some of the different national stuff that's going on, it's very easy for you to see how some young people will get charged up and really have a release based in the form of violence in the streets, burning, breaking, and causing a lot of property damage. And our city is consisted of a lot of local businesses who are already suffering from um, COVID-19 lockdown, and some of the different things that this virus has caused harm to us. So this would have been, I think, a devastating dynamic that would have happened to our city, that I think that we dodged the bullet from. And this goes down to, you know, um, not holding people accountable and giving them immunity to be able to go out and basically harm a particular type of people in their community, a subgroup of people, of black and brown people. And if this was any other situation, I truly believe if this was policing girls, young white girls, or targeting older white men, and issues like that, there would be so much more less tolerance towards this issue in a way that people will get behind it, and they would be waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning looking for solutions and looking for a way out of this cycle that we have every time we have a young person who is killed um, um, wrongfully, wrongfully. Um, so, you know, I know it took me a long time to get to this point, but this is what I'm talking about. This is what's next? How do we get out of this vicious cycle of this officer that I mentioned who is still with the law enforcement agency that I talked about here in our city, and has not been held accountable. We had an investigation, internal investigation with this guy through cops investigating cops, which how can you not have biases with that? How can you not have protectionist type mentality going towards that? And then you had another investigation with this officer from the state police, which are still another law enforcement agency investigating a law enforcement agency, and he was exonerated for the same behavior that resulted in the death of Mr. Floyd. He had his knee on the back of our people's neck. And fortunately, we had physical injuries, emotional injuries, but we didn't result into death in any of those cases. And he was exonerated. And there's a lot of times that people are abused and put in these situations and subdued wrongfully without explanation, and it's not national headlines, and it's okay not to think about that. But then when we have a death, then all of a sudden we have outcry, then we have our athletes and we have our leaders and we have our entertainers and we have all these different people who have something to say about it. But all those people that I just mentioned know that this is the reality that we have all the time for a long time. Policing doesn't come from a great place, especially for people of color. It just started bad, and it's bad now for a lot of people of color. And we're talking since pre during the antebellum period of our own history to 2020. Nothing has really changed with the fact that you have someone of power who is protected by an establishment with people who sometimes come to the table in a way that their whole intent is to bring trauma and harm to a particular group of people. I mean, that's just what it is, and no one gets riled up about it until a death. And then, really, with that, I mean, like I was gonna just list off really the names of people that have been killed, and it was so long and so hard to see all those names. It was like you see in the memorial of veterans of war, where you see all these names of people, and it's like it's getting. I mean, the list is long. I mean, the list is long and sad and worrisome, and it's beyond worrisome. It's tragic. It's tragic that we've had this list. We do have this list that we're adding on this list to this day, and um, no accountability in a lot of those cases have happened. We've had with this particular local incident, we've had probably 10, 8, 9, I don't know how many complaints we have, and none of them overall have not been sustained in a way that give validation to the person who has been victimized by these incidents and these complaints against police officers. And you take that nationally. um, I mean, it brings up so many different more issues about why someone fears the cops, runs from the cops, um, doesn't comply with cops, doesn't respect cops, in a way that is very it's very systematic. It's set up in a way where you can't win, even if when you're doing the right thing, even when you're not out here taking advantage of people and committing crimes. There's law professors, there's educators, there's people of influence, there's professional athletes. Any person of color is not immune to going back to this particular vulnerability within an interaction with a police officer. That's crazy. And so I implore us to really get out of this cycle by coming out with what's next. And what's next is solutions. And there's a lot of people talking about this is bad, this is bad. There's a lot of people talking about how this isn't right. There's a lot of people who got a lot of opinions about, you know, um, that it's something that we got to fix. There's a lot of people with lots of money that are talking about how this is an injustice to people, humans. But then it dies out, and then we get maybe a conviction, or worst case, we get an exoneration and this and that, and we're upset, and then we tolerate that upsetness, and then we're good. And then the next thing that happens is we have another incident. While along the way, we have incidents that happen every single day to people such as myself, black and brown people who are dealing with everyday incidents that don't make it to the national level. We just happen to catch it by a bystander on walking by who caught Mr. Floyd. Now, I mean, I'm telling you, the whole narrative will be totally different if that camera wasn't there. That whole narrative would be totally different in our particular cases if we didn't have some of that body camera evidence speaking for itself to show us that the police report and the actual facts on the ground that we're looking at, it doesn't chime up. There's some gaps in time. There's there's narratives by the law enforcement group themselves that are giving you a light of something that isn't there. And so it's just really shows how scary it is for people, ordinary people, every single day, who are just trying to do the right thing. And so I wanted to come back to this again about what's next. What's next? What's next for us? What's next for people out here who are so upset? What's next for people out here who are getting victimized? What's next for people out here who have loved ones out here who are doing the right thing behind the badge? What's next? So, back to me and back to what I want to do. I really want to create policy and procedures that are fair to people of color. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm not asking for passes. I'm not asking for you to treat criminals better than they deserve. I'm asking you to have equity and fairness in how you treat people in a way that you treat everyone else. That's what I'm asking for. And so I wanted to come up. I have some. So you have a couple different avenues, I guess, when we talk about what's next. You have, for example, what's happening in our city right now. We have community oversight, which basically means that we're going to have a commission of people who are independent of the police and their investigations about complaints they bring to the table from the community, so they can really honestly look at all the facts supposedly in a way that they have the ability to be able to advocate for the people in the community. Ultimately, it's a rough coverage of that. That's a tool. That's one tool. And unfortunately for me, I think in our particular city, that tool is the only tool that is being brought to the table. And that's the answer. That's the solution. And so back to what my problem is with that is we have options right now, uh, and things that we know right now that we don't have to have all this process of oversight commission to deal with. For our leaders to figure out, for our leaders to sit down and wedge out time and energy into this issue. So we want to talk about that. So we got one thing here. We got the Community Oversight Commission, right? Who's supposed to be doing all these different things and really overseeing the behaviors and policies and procedures that are implemented by the police departments in our municipality. And then you have a policy and procedures that, for example, that they will be looking at, but you have some policy procedures that are happening procedurally within arrest that you can do something about right now. So we talk about limiting the use of force. There's something that's called a force continuum that all law enforcement officers have within their policy and their procedure that they do. And there's certain things that happen within this force continuum that validate what they do to a person they have interaction with. And that continuum is so written in a way that um, you can blink and there's justification for them to utilize force. And taking a good strong look at what your municipality's force continuum is that is enforced by police officers and bringing that to your leaders table and ask them, what can we do about this, is a what's next situation. um, a long-term one, that's a short-term. A long-term one is really looking at when your municipality has what we call police union contract renewal. For us, we have it coming up in July 2021, where your leaders, I should say, the council has an opportunity to negotiate a contract within the city and the police department and union to uh, approve or not approve what they bring to the table. And that's really comes up, I think, every couple of years or so, or every 3 years or so, I'm not sure, but where you have your leaders have an opportunity to address some of these policies and procedures where they have a say so in what happens. They have a say so in what is being brought to their community members and how police is enforced in their community, and working on that and not just having them approve a police contract that has a couple of updates, but overall is the same thing that was happening um, the few years before that and few years before that when it comes into the contract negotiation. Put some energy into that. Advocate within that is a way. So getting your leaders to understand that when that time comes, you bring to the table solutions and resolutions to them so they can have change and they can promote that departmental changes within your post department in a way that they will have a better outcome in some of these interactions with Black and Brown people. What's another one? Oh, this is a good one, and this happened. This happened with us too when it comes to the body cams. We had body cam footage that gave us a different perspective other than what we had been told or what was written in the police report that we're able to look at independently in a way that, um, as a community, we can start holding some people accountable. And right now, from what I understand, when an officer does not have his body cam footage on when he's having an interaction, I've seen a lot, a couple of times that the body cam footage camera has been knocked off, and then all of a sudden there's no record of what's going on. You can hear it from other officers involved in this and that, but sometimes some of the different things that you want to see are missing in body cam footage. There was even a case in an internal investigation where the officer um, didn't wear his body cam. He forgot to turn it on that day for a shift, and that was a day and an interaction that involved complaints. And so when it comes to body cam, an example of being able to, like, what's next? How can we improve? How can we get this thing more pure and a process that it was designed for is to really look at the penalties when an officer doesn't turn his body camera on. When an officer has a body cam footage, and all of a sudden you don't have that footage, and the department doesn't produce that footage. There were some issues with that going on where they just all of a sudden we just don't have that. Where was the jail tape? Where was the arrest tape? And all these different, there's sections there, and we need to have a tighter way of being able to. I mean, because in a lot of ways, if we don't have a passerby with a camera recording, then all we normally really have is that body cam footage to be able to kind of understand what's going on there. So we need to make sure that, that body cam footage is somehow better secured, better presented in a way where the community and future oversight commissions can really weigh in on the factual things that are happening on the ground. So those are some of the what's next. I think that really will help people be able to say, like, what can I do? And this is what you do. You take this to your local leaders, your local council members, who are able to, uh, as a body, go to their city manager, or in some municipalities, as the mayor is able to hire and fire, is able to influence the city manager to do this, or your job's on the line. Talk with the city attorney, change this, or your job's on the line. Because my community is telling me that this is the problem, and we are the ones who have been elected to do this, solve this problem, and you need to help me solve this problem for the community that you serve. And that dynamic is not necessarily as clear as it should be when it comes to that, because we have relationships, we have, um, as you, we have egos, we have different things that are in play that really get in the way of people actually listening to what the community has to say. There's a lot of filters that happen within that. And then if you have some leadership in a way that don't really appreciate the problem in the way that they should, then it doesn't even make it there. And so then you end up with someone who has a history of complaints still out here doing what he or she has always done, and the outcomes are what they are. And those outcomes generally don't wind up being positive, they end up being negative. The officer that was involved with Mr. Floyd had numerous complaints, from what I understand. And there was, and I'm assuming there was not accountability, but there was protection. There was, a situation where they were um, not being taught how to do it better, and it was being put to the side. And a lot of these cases don't end up with murder, or someone getting hurt in a way where their life is over, but these cases always end up with someone getting traumatized and injured. In most cases, when you have someone out here who has previous complaints, is going out here and being emboldened, being exonerated, being emboldened to go ahead and not really change behavior going forward. So I just really wanted to get some things off my chest, because uh, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, a lot of the people that I see out here who are posting certain things, I just don't see you doing anything different. I don't see you coming up with solutions in a way that breaks this cycle. Um, I don't see myself doing anything right now that breaks this cycle by doing this video. But it makes me feel better. It makes me feel better to be able to get these things off my chest. Because what else am I supposed to do? What else am I supposed to do right now, other than, like I said, work on some of these different things about what's next, continue talking to the leadership that we have in play about making these changes, about what we're going through in our community. What else do you have? And this is what you get. You get to hear me talk and ramble from one subject to another about something that it really is really frightening for a lot of people out here. It's really frightening to go out here and get pulled over and see those lights coming behind your rearview mirror and not really know what type of person you're gonna get. And I really want to make sure you understand this, that when it comes to police officers and policing, I was almost a police officer in some ways. I went to school for criminal justice, and I have a great respect and admiration for someone who is out there to protect and serve, and who don't really um, condone the actions of some of their fellow officers. But with that being said, the culture within the departments and things like that, um, if you're one of those few officers that really want to do the right thing, if you're one of those few officers that really want to speak out, your culture and within your department does not give you the avenue of success. You would be treated unfairly, in my opinion, from what I understand, and you would be an outcast, in some ways, because you are going against the institution. And anyone who has a family to feed, anyone who wants to make sure they protect their best interests at heart and keep their job, you're more likely not to go ahead and do that. And that's why we got to change these policies, and where officers can make complaints and be anonymous. In a lot of ways that contract written, officers can't even make a complaint without being anonymous. Officers can't even tell about what has happened right in front of them, without that having some type of autonomy to that, in a way where it starts to produce that cultural change within the department. And so these are examples. These are things I'm trying to explain to you that really make it impossible for us to have any change through our avenues that we've done for so long, and our outcries that we've had so much, and our rioting and protesting that we've done to perfection, and the cycle is still there. So I want to thank you for my rambling, letting me ramble on today. It makes me feel a lot better that at least one person maybe sees this and sees a little bit of value. Maybe one person takes some of the what's next that I talked about, a little bit of what I talked about, and starts holding their leadership accountable, their council people, members accountable, their mayor accountable, their city managers accountable, their city attorneys accountable to what's going on here, as opposed to just yelling about it in the bullhorn, just going out here and marching up and down the street, but really getting yourself, position yourself to bring this to the table, or putting yourself in a situation where you get a seat at the table, um, which I think is a beautiful thing when you start to understand how the process works, so you can break it down and fix it. So, my name is Chuck Grigsby. I'm just a guy who just wants to see people do the right thing, and I just want to thank you guys for and gals listening to me. Um, and I apologize for any feelings that I've hurt, or any people that feel defensive about some of the different things that I said today. My intention was not to do that. My intention was just to really speak from the heart, and just talk about what's next, and why a little bit, and hopefully some of this sticks. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate the people out here who are doing the right thing every single day. Policing is not an easy job. It's one of the toughest jobs in the world, in my personal opinion. I've done ride-alongs. I've done some police training. I kind of understand some of the demands that the community puts upon yourself, and you need some more support at the end of the day. You need more people to support you, and support the trauma that you deal with from people who are not doing the right thing, for the stresses that come to the table as you do your job out here and do the right thing, and constantly get put down for that in some way. So my heart goes out to you as well, who are out there, who really take a lot of pride and shun the fact that these types of things happen in our nation and in our communities. And I really just want to applaud you, and don't get it twisted. Just know that when someone is complaining about police reform, we're not talking about you. We're talking about the ones that are out here, that have complaints, that are out here, who are bringing these biases in. They're out here. They're treating people unjustly and cruelly, and that's who we're talking to. That's who we want to fix. That's who we want to target, and we want to salute the ones who are out here, like I said, doing what's best, and protecting and serving people like myself and others out here in our communities. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Appreciate you.